The void of space was silent, but then it came. A distress call, weak at first, crackling across the darkness. It repeated again and again, carrying the same desperate words in every language known across the stars. A cry for help. Someone was under attack, someone was dying, and no one was coming. For hours the signal echoed. Alien ships passed it by. Traders, mercenaries, and scouts all heard it, but none answered. To them it was not worth the risk. Distress signals often meant traps. Pirates sent them to lure the greedy. Armadas used them to bait their enemies. To most of the galaxy, a distress call was a curse, not a plea. But this call did not fade. It grew stronger, sharper, reaching deeper into the dark until it touched the one power everyone hoped it would never reach: Earth. The human fleet listened. They did not hesitate. There was no debate, no vote, no long talks between leaders. Humanity had learned long ago that hesitation only cost lives. The commitment was simple. The deadliest human fleet was mobilized. Engines roared alive. Weapon systems prepared. And giant shadows began to rise from Earth's orbit. The fleet had a name whispered in every corner of the galaxy. Some called it the Iron Tide. Others called it the Black Armada. To humans, it had no grand title. It was simply the fleet, the one built for the worst of wars, the one that never left survivors when it fought. Ships the size of cities drifted out of orbit. Their armor was black as night, covered in scars from old battles. Blue light glowed from their engines so bright that it painted the stars around them. Smaller ships, escorts with sharp wings, moved into formation. Together they looked less like machines and more like a single creature, a predator born in the dark. Words spread faster than light. Alien captains spoke in hushed tones. "The humans have moved," they whispered. "The fleet has left orbit." Panic spread across trade routes. Criminal guilds closed down. Even pirate lords pulled their ships into hiding. Because if Earth's fleet was moving, then something terrible was coming. The distress signal grew clearer now. It came from the edge of human space, from a colony world barely known outside of star charts. The message carried screams, the sound of battle, and then silence. The voice that called out begged for help again and again. The humans listened, and the fleet accelerated. They crossed systems in silence. There were no speeches, no songs of glory, only the steady beat of engines and the cold hum of weapons charging. On the bridge of the lead ship, officers worked with calm hands. Their faces carried no fear, no joy, only focus. For them, this was not about heroism. It was duty. Humans answered distress calls, always. Aliens remembered a different time. Long ago, when humanity had been weak, their own cries for help had been ignored. No one came when Earth burned. No one came when their colonies were slaughtered. Humanity had carried that memory like a scar. And now, whenever a call reached them, they answered with fire. The fleet entered the outer system where the signal came from. Stars stretched long across the viewports as their drive slowed. One by one, the massive ships emerged into sight. Silence fell across every channel. For a moment, nothing moved. Space itself seemed to hold its breath. Then the human fleet spread into formation. Capital ships took the center, their guns locking into position. Cruisers flanked them, sharp and fast, ready to strike. Tiny fighters began to wake, engines glowing like sparks. The fleet looked like a storm rising across the black. A single message was sent across open channels. 4 words only: "This is the fleet." Aliens listening far away shivered. Traders turned off their receivers. Even pirates silenced their comms, because they all knew what those words meant. Once the humans had arrived, the battle was already decided. On the colony surface, survivors watched the sky. Smoke and fire covered their cities. They had almost given up hope. But then they saw it, dozens of ships breaking through the clouds, shadows that covered the stars. The ground shook with their engines. The screams of war fell quiet for a moment, drowned by the roar of human steel. For those survivors, it was the sound of salvation. For their enemies, it was the sound of doom. The deadliest human fleet had come. Rising tension. The fleet's arrival was like a shadow falling across the stars. The distress signal had gone silent now, almost as if the enemy understood what was coming. The colony below burned in silence, waiting while the human warships floated above like executioners in the sky. But across nearby systems, panic began to spread. Alien ships scattered along the trade routes turned away from human space. Messages flashed across private channels. Do not go near them. The humans have moved. Their fleet has answered the call. For centuries, humans had built this reputation. They did not fight often, but when they did, their wars ended in fire. They never arrived in small numbers. They never came with half measures. When they moved with the full weight of their fury. A group of alien scouts had been hiding in the asteroid belt near the colony, watching, waiting to report. Their ships were small, fast, and armed with only light weapons. They thought they could slip through unnoticed. They were wrong. The lead human battleship sent out a pulse, silent to the ear but lethal to sensors. Within seconds, the scout systems collapsed. Their engines sputtered, their weapons went dead, and one by one their hulls cracked as beams of light cut through the dark. No warning, no hesitation. The scouts vanished before they had even screamed. Silence returned, but the message was clear. The human fleet did not allow spies. On the colony surface, survivors stared at the skies with both awe and fear. They knew the fleet had come to protect them, but the sheer size of those ships was overwhelming. Each one was larger than a city. Their shadows turned daylight into twilight, and when they moved, the ground itself seemed to tremble. Children pointed at the sky, whispering that angels had come. The elders whispered something different, that monsters had awakened. The galaxy had its own way of telling stories. For aliens, humans were always the wild card, the unpredictable species. Some said they were compassionate beyond reason, always helping the weak. Others said they were vengeful demons answering calls not out of kindness, but out of anger. Both stories were true, and both filled the stars tonight. The distress call had reached them, but no one knew what it truly meant. Why had humans sent their deadliest fleet instead of a small patrol? Why mobilize a force so feared, so heavy, when a smaller group could have done the same job? Whispers began among the enemy Armada, still lurking in the system. They were the ones who had attacked the colony. At first, they had laughed at the weak defenses, but now their confidence was breaking. Commanders shouted over comms, demanding answers, demanding a plan. Their fleets had won battles before, but never against this. The humans did not rush. That was the worst part. They did not storm forward blindly. They waited. Their ships held position, forming a wall across the sky. Their silence was more terrifying than any weapon. It was the silence of predators watching prey, deciding when to strike. In the command center of the lead human ship, the officers stood like statues. Data filled their screens. Enemy fleet positions, colony damage, numbers of survivors. Yet no one spoke loudly. Orders were short, precise. Calmness filled the air like a storm waiting to break. The fleet's admiral sat at the center. His face was stern, unreadable. His voice carried no emotion when he finally spoke. Mark enemy vessels. Prioritize heavy carriers. Prepare countermeasures. The words were simple, but every officer knew what they meant. The fleet was preparing not just to defend, but to annihilate. Far away, alien mercenaries tuned into the public channels, listening for scraps of information. When they heard the humans had fired on scouts without warning, many cut their drives and fled. They wanted no part in what was about to come, because they all knew. When the humans answered a distress call, they were not just saving lives. They were sending a warning to the entire galaxy. On the colony, survivors crowded around shattered radios, desperate to hear something. At last, the human fleet broadcast a message to the surface. The voice was steady, almost calm. We have arrived. Stay under cover. You will live. Tears fell from faces blackened with smoke. People clutched each other. Hope returned, fragile but real. Above in orbit, the enemy armada stirred. Thousands of ships adjusted their formations. They had strength in numbers more than the colony had ever seen, but numbers had never saved anyone from the humans before. The air grew heavy with tension, even though there was no air in space. Every sensor, every scanner, every mind waited for the moment, the first shot, the moment when silence would break into fire. For now, the fleet remained still, a wall of steel and light casting its shadow across the burning colony below. The rising tension was unbearable. To the survivors, it felt like salvation waiting to descend. To the enemy, it felt like doom ready to fall. And in that silence, one truth became clear. Humanity was not here only to fight. They were here to remind the galaxy why they were feared. The first clash of the moment came without warning. For hours, the human fleet had waited, their black warships holding position like hunters in the dark. The enemy Armada circled at a distance, restless and uneasy, whispering through private comms about when to strike. Then, with a sudden flash of light, the silence shattered. The first enemy carrier unleashed a swarm of fighters. Dozens of small ships burst forward, their engines glowing red. They darted across the void like insects, fast and angry, hoping to break through the human line. Behind them, cruisers armed with heavy cannons opened fire, streaks of plasma lighting up the black sky. The human fleet did not move. Not at first. They let the enemy come closer. Fighters raced toward them, desperate to prove that the humans were not invincible. For a brief second, the galaxy held its breath. Maybe this would be the battle where the humans would finally fall. Then the humans answered. The forward cruisers of the fleet lit up, their hulls glowing with energy. Beams of pure white light cut across the dark faster than any eye could follow. Enemy fighters were erased in an instant. Whole wings of ships blinked out of existence, their wreckage scattering into the void. The survivors turned sharply, trying to escape, but the beams followed merciless and precise. The first clash was not a battle. It was a slaughter. The enemy's confidence cracked. Commanders screamed over their channels, ordering reinforcements. More carriers released their swarms. Heavier ships fired again, filling space with fire. Explosions bloomed across the darkness like suns. And still the humans advanced. Their capital ships moved forward slowly like mountains drifting through the stars. Each one unleashed weapons that had not been seen in centuries. Plasma lances shot out, cutting battleships in half with a single strike. Kinetic slugs the size of buildings smashed through enemy lines, ripping apart shields as if they were paper. Missiles streaked in swarms glowing like fireflies, but when they struck, they tore entire cruisers apart in seconds. The enemy fought back with desperation. Their ships filled the dark with fire, hammering the human shields again and again, but the fleet held. Their armor, scarred from countless wars, did not break. Their shields bent, but never shattered. On the colony below, survivors watched the sky burn. From the surface, the battle looked like storms tearing across the heavens. Streaks of light clashed with bursts of flame, turning the night into a sea of fire. Children covered their ears, though no sound could reach them. Mothers held their families close, whispering prayers to gods both human and alien. The human fleet pressed forward. Their fighters, silent and disciplined, launched from hidden bays. Unlike the enemy swarms, these fighters moved with perfect coordination. They cut through enemy lines with brutal efficiency, each one striking like a blade guided by unseen hands. Where the enemy's chaos swirled, the humans brought order. One alien commander screamed across comms, desperate, furious. "They are only human, break them." But his words meant nothing. His ship was locked by the fleet's lead dreadnought. A single shot pierced his hull, and the commander, his ship, and his crew were erased in silence. The enemy began to falter. For every 10 ships they sent forward, 9 were destroyed. Their formations broke apart. Fear spread across their lines, stronger than any weapon. They had believed the old stories of human fury were exaggerated. Now they knew the truth. The stories had not been strong enough. On the bridge of the lead human battleship, the admiral stood calmly. His eyes never wavered as he gave his orders. Advance! Break their carriers! The fleet obeyed. Capital ships surged forward, tearing through the center of the enemy armada. Beams and missiles lit the void, smashing the carriers one by one. The sky turned into a graveyard of burning wrecks, broken ships spinning silently into the dark. The survivors of the colony looked up and saw hope painted in fire. For the first time, they believed they might live. But not everyone was celebrating. Hidden among the chaos, some enemy commanders began to whisper. The humans were fighting too well too quickly. They were not surprised by the attack. They had come prepared. The realization spread slowly. This was not just a rescue. This was something else. The humans had known what was waiting here. They had known the Armada would be waiting, and still they had come. Above the burning colony, the clash raged on. Enemy ships still fought, but their strength was breaking. The deadliest human fleet moved with the weight of history behind them. Every shot, every strike carried not just firepower, but a message. Humanity remembered. Humanity never forgot. The first clash was ending, but the war was not. As the last carrier burned, a signal flickered across the battlefield, faint but sharp. It was not human, nor was it from the enemy. It was something else. Another presence watching from the edge of the stars. The admiral's face tightened as he read the signal. The fleet had won the first clash, but the true enemy had not yet revealed itself. And in that moment, the survivors in the galaxy alike understood a terrible truth. The battle had only just begun. The hidden truth. The battle was over, at least for now. The wrecks of enemy ships drifted silently through space, glowing with fire as they broke apart into dust. Survivors on the colony cheered and cried as the sky cleared, their hope returning with every passing second. But on the bridge of the human fleet, there was no celebration. The admiral's face was stern, his eyes locked on the faint signal that had appeared at the edge of the system. It was different from the distress call. It carried no words, no cries for help, only a sharp pulse repeating in silence, a hidden mark, almost like a signature. Unknown origin, one officer whispered, his voice steady but uneasy. It does not belong to the enemy armada. It was placed here. The admiral gave no reply. He already knew. The truth was that humanity had not been surprised by the colony's distress call. They had been waiting for it. For weeks, their intelligence had whispered of something unusual, a pattern of attacks across the rim, colonies left as bait, distress signals planted like traps. Humanity had studied the pattern and followed it here. The fleet had not come only to save. They had come to test, to draw out whoever was hiding behind the chaos. The enemy armada that attacked the colony had thought themselves predators. In truth, they had been tools. Someone else had guided them. Someone bold enough to try luring humanity into a fight. And now that hidden hand had revealed itself with the faint pulse echoing across the void. The admiral finally spoke, his voice low and calm. "They wanted us here." A silence spread across the bridge. The officers exchanged glances but said nothing. They all understood what that meant. Humanity's enemies were no longer afraid to provoke them. Someone had grown bold enough to challenge the fleet directly. On the colony below, survivors began to rebuild what little they could. Fires burned across shattered cities and bodies lay buried under stone and steel, but the people clung to life, their eyes fixed on the ships above. They believed their saviors had come only out of compassion. They did not know the deeper truth, that their suffering had been a move in a larger game. Elsewhere in the system, the remnants of the enemy armada tried to flee. Broken ships limped through the dark, carrying whispers of horror. They spoke of weapons they could not match, of humans who fought like ghosts, of fleets that moved like storms. But their words reached the wrong ears. Other powers, watching from the shadows, listened closely. For them, the first clash was only a beginning. In distant halls of alien empires, leaders leaned over maps of stars, their voices hushed. The humans have answered. Their deadliest fleet has moved. Some were afraid, remembering old wars where humans had burned entire armadas to ash. Others were curious, wondering if the time had finally come to test humanity's strength again. And in those halls, deals were made. Promises whispered, plans formed. Because if humans could be lured once, they could be lured again. Back in the command center, the Admiral studied the silent pulse. It was not a message for help. It was a message of recognition. Whoever had sent it wanted the humans to know they were being watched. "They are probing us," the Admiral said at last, testing our response. The officers nodded. None argued. It explained everything. The baited distress call, the enemy armada lying in wait, the sudden appearance of the hidden pulse. It was a game of war played in shadows, but humans did not play games, not anymore. The Admiral turned toward the viewing screen, watching the wrecks drift. His face was calm, but deep in his eyes burned a quiet fire. "Prepare long-range scans. Trace that signal. If they want us to come, we will come." The officers obeyed, their hands flying across controls. New scans stretched into the dark, reaching for the hidden hand that had sent the signal. On the colony, the survivors still celebrated, unaware that they had been pawns in something larger. Children danced in the ruins, their voices filled with laughter. As mothers and fathers looked to the sky in gratitude, they believed the nightmare was over. They could not know that for humanity the nightmare had only just begun. In the silence of space, the pulse echoed again. A cold, steady rhythm as if a predator were knocking on the door. The humans listened, and they answered in silence, their ships shifting into new formations. The fleet had come to rescue, but now it was preparing for something far greater. Across the galaxy, fear spread once more, not because of what humanity had done, but because of what they were about to do. If the deadliest fleet was already moving, then no one was safe from what would follow. And in the heart of the darkness, far from the burning colony, unseen eyes watched with quiet satisfaction. The trap had been sprung. The humans had taken the bait, but those unseen watchers had made one fatal mistake. They had forgotten what it meant when humanity moved not out of fear, not out of desperation, but out of memory. Because humanity never forgot and they never forgave. The final revelation, the wreckage of the enemy armada, drifted in silence, glowing faintly as fire consumed what remained. The human fleet held position. Their black warships spread like a wall of steel across the stars. The distress call had been answered. The colony had been saved, but on the bridge of the lead dreadnought no one felt victory. The pulse still echoed, that hidden signal, faint and sharp, beating steadily like the heart of a predator in the dark. Scans reached deeper into the void, peeling away the shadows, and then, at the edge of the system, the truth appeared. A vast structure emerged from the darkness. Not a ship, not a fleet, but something worse, a station hidden in the void, its hull blacker than night. It had been cloaked, invisible to the naked eye, watching silently as the battle raged. The distress call had been its lure, the enemy armada had been its bait. The entire fight, the entire slaughter had been nothing more than a test. The bridge fell silent as the image sharpened on their screens. Towers rose from the station's surface, bristling with weapons. Strange symbols glowed faintly across its hull, the markings of an empire no one had seen before. This was no pirate trap. This was the hand of a greater enemy. The Admiral's voice was calm when he spoke. So they wanted to see us bleed. But humanity had not bled. Humanity had burned their armada to ash. The station did not attack. It did not move. It only watched. From its surface, a single message was broadcast across open channels. The voice was deep, alien, filled with confidence. "We have measured you, humans. We know your strength. We know your fleet. Next time it will not be enough." The words hung in silence, cold and certain. On the colony below, survivors froze as the message echoed through the radios. Fear returned to their faces. If this was only the beginning, then what storms were still coming? On the bridge of the dreadnought, the Admiral did not flinch. He leaned forward, his eyes locked on the alien station. "Transmit reply." The officers obeyed. Across the system, the human fleet spoke as one. Their voice was cold, steady, unshaken. "You made a mistake." The alien station waited, its silence heavy. The admiral continued, his words carrying like thunder across the void. "You wanted to measure us. You wanted to see what we would do, but you already know the truth. We do not come to prove ourselves. We come to end threats. You sent your armada, and we answered. You send your station, and we see you. Next time, we will not answer with a fleet. We will answer with everything." The message ended. The silence that followed was louder than any battle. On the surface, survivors felt the words like a storm rolling across their bones. In distant systems, aliens listening to the broadcast felt their blood run cold because they knew what it meant when humans promised everything. It meant the full weight of Earth, every fleet, every weapon, every fury forged in the fires of history. The alien station remained still. For a moment, it seemed like it might fire. Its weapons glowed faintly, ready to test humanity once more, but then slowly it faded back into the dark. Cloaking systems shimmered, and the station was gone, swallowed by the void. It had tested enough for now. The admiral stood in silence. His officers waited, watching him, waiting for the next order. At last, he spoke. "Record this battle. Broadcast it across human space. Let every world know what happened here." "Sir," one officer asked, "what message should we leave for the colony?" The admiral's eyes never left the stars. His words were cold but steady. "Tell them the truth. We answer every call and we never forget." The officers obeyed. The message was sent. On the colony, survivors wept not only from relief, but from the weight of those words. Humanity had saved them, but humanity had also sent a warning, both to friend and to foe. The fleet turned slowly, engines flaring as the warships aligned once more, their shadows stretched across the stars, their guns still glowing from battle. Without celebration, without triumph, they began their silent march back into the void. But before they left the system, long-range scanners caught something else. Another signal, fainter this time, but similar. Another distress call pulsing from far beyond the rim. The admiral closed his eyes for a moment, then gave the only order that could be given. "Set course!" The fleet shifted once more, turning toward the new signal. Engines roared, and the black warships cut through the stars like blades. The survivors on the colony watched them fade into the dark, their hearts torn between hope and fear, because now they understood what the galaxy already knew. The deadliest human fleet did not rest.